What's going on, guys? It's Anthony here with Jack Mondello and Noah Huang, and today we're going to be talking about monetary and fiscal policy and everything you need to know about them.
Before understanding monetary versus fiscal policy, one must know the key vocabulary related to this topic. First is deficit spending. This is when the government spends more than it collects in taxes. This usually causes the government to borrow money from various sources, and eventually leads to increased national debt. This leads us to the next term, national debt, the accumulated deficits of a government over time. This may influence a nation's economic policies and strategies towards economic growth. Then, supply-side economics. This is the belief that cutting taxes and eliminating regulations boosts production and economic growth and expansion. This is a more free belief that advocates for less government intervention and involvement in the economy in order to expand the economy. On the contrary is demand-side economics. This is the belief that increasing government spending stimulates demand and economic growth. Opposite of supply-side economics, this advocates for more government involvement in the economy in order to expand the financial growth of a nation. Then, Keynesian economics is the belief in using fiscal policy to manage the economy, which we'll get in later to what that means. Lastly, monetarism. This is the belief in controlling the economy through money supply and using these strategies to benefit the economy.
Monetary policy is known as the actions taken by a central bank to manage the money supply and interest rates in a country. In the United States, the central bank is called the Federal Reserve. The main goals of monetary policy are to promote stable prices, maximum employment rates, and moderate long-term interest rates. To do this, the Federal Reserve influences the amount of money and credit available in the economy. There are three primary tools used in monetary policy. First, the Federal Reserve can change interest rates. When interest rates are low, it becomes cheap for people and businesses to borrow money. This leads to more spending and investment. But when interest rates are raised, borrowing becomes more expensive, which helps reduce inflation. Second, the Federal Reserve can adjust reserve requirements. This is the amount of money that banks have to keep in reserve and not lend out. Lowering the reserve requirement gives banks more money to lend, which increases the money supply. Raising the requirement does the opposite. Third, the Federal Reserve conducts open market operations, which means buying or selling government bonds with cash. When the Federal Reserve buys bonds, it adds money to the economy. But when it sells bonds, it takes money out of the economy. A common example of monetary policy in action is when the Federal Reserve changes the federal funds rate. This is the interest rate at which banks lend money to each other overnight. If the economy is slowing down, the Federal Reserve might lower the rate. And this would encourage banks to lend out more money, which increases spending and supports economic growth.
Fiscal policy is a powerful tool used by the central government to influence the overall health of the economy. It is primarily managed by two branches of the United States government, Congress and the President. Through fiscal policy, the government adjusts its levels of taxation and spending to help steer the economy in the desired direction. One of the main tools of fiscal policy is taxation. When the government increases taxes, it takes more money out of consumers' and businesses' pockets. This usually leads to reduced spending and slows down economic activity, which can help cool an overheating economy. On the other hand, when taxes are lowered, people and businesses have more disposable income to spend. This can boost demand for goods and services, encouraging economic growth, especially during times of recession when the economy needs a push. The second tool in fiscal policy is government spending. When the government increases its spending on projects like infrastructure, education, or social programs, it injects money directly into the economy. This can create jobs, increase demand, and promote overall economic growth. Conversely, reducing government spending can help slow down the economy and curb inflation, which is when prices rise too quickly and reduce consumers' purchasing power. Fiscal policy is especially important during periods of economic instability. During a recession, for example, the government may lower taxes and increase spending to stimulate growth and reduce unemployment. During times of high inflation, the government may do the opposite, raising taxes and cutting spending to cool demand and stabilize prices. One example of tax cuts and fiscal policy is Reaganomics, and one example of increased spending in fiscal policy is the New Deal.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. I hope it was informative about the differences between monetary and fiscal policy.